Hey guys, Jason here, and welcome to lesson 1 of a new tutorial series that's going to teach you how to work with commercial sewing patterns. Now, if you've never worked with a commercial sewing pattern before, they can be pretty intimidating. So I'm going to break everything down and show you step by step of how to decipher all the information. And hopefully when this series is done, you'll have a better understanding of commercial patterns and how to use them. Now, our first lesson is just going to cover the actual pattern envelope. There's a ton of information on here, so let's take a look at it and see what it all means.
This is the front of the envelope, and this particular set of patterns is for a set of Wizard of Oz costumes. As you can see, this pattern is put out by Simplicity. You're always going to be able to find the pattern brand on the front of the envelope. Simplicity is one of the major brands, just like McCall's, Butterick, and Vogue. But there's a lot of other brands too, like Quick Sew, Berta, Green Pepper, and New Look, as well as several independent publishers you can find in fabric stores as well as online. You'll also always find the pattern number. This one is 4136. Make sure when you're buying patterns online, like on eBay or Etsy, that you check to make sure that the pattern number matches the pattern you're looking for. Pattern companies recycle their pattern numbers after a pattern is discontinued, so you might find two patterns online that have the same brand and the same number. Like this one. This is also Simplicity pattern number 4136, but as you can see, it's from quite a few years ago. Finally, on every envelope front, you're going to see a picture of the finished garments that the pattern has patterns for. These are also called views. Remember that because it'll be important later. This costume pattern has 3 views. View A is Dorothy's dress, View B is the Wicked Witch costume, and View C is Glinda's gown. Sometimes the envelope front won't have photos at all. Instead, it'll have drawings or sketches known as renderings, like you see here. However, most patterns will have a combination of renderings and photos, like this one. But before we move on, there's one other thing that you should know about views. For example, on this envelope, you can see that these 3 dresses are basically the same except for the length and the sleeve variation. But here's a blouse and a skirt that are completely different. This happens a lot in patterns. Sometimes a pattern will use a basic design that you can customize, like the dress in this pattern, and other times the pattern will contain completely different garments, like the blouse and the skirt. And as you can see here, sometimes a pattern will contain both. But all of these variations are called views.
Now let's take a look at the back of the envelope. There is a ton of information back here, and here's where it can start to get a little crazy. So we're going to break it down step by step and explain what all this means and why it's important. One thing important that you want to remember is that the layout of the pattern envelopes is going to vary from brand to brand and pattern to pattern, but generally all the same information is going to be on all of the backs of the envelopes. It just might be in a different place. Also, sometimes they put stuff on this little back flap. One thing the brand Berta does is they actually print some of the information on the tissues on the inside, which is kind of annoying, but let's take a closer look at the back of the envelope.
First of all, half of the back is in French, so if you don't speak French, you can completely ignore all of this. In fact, let's get rid of it. Okay, here's some of the important stuff. You're usually going to be able to find line drawings of all of the back sides of all of the garments. This is mostly so you can see how the garments are put together and help you answer questions like, are there zippers back there? Is it backless? Are there pockets? Etc. And again, you'll be able to see the letters for each view to help you identify which drawing corresponds to which view. You'll also want to read over the suggested fabrics section. This is never a rule that has to be followed. However, if the pictures on the front show a flowy gown, the fabrics suggested on the back will be for flowy fabrics. And if you don't use those fabrics or something similar, you're not going to get a flowy gown.
Now, this Wizard of Oz pattern doesn't have it, but some patterns will have somewhere on the envelope back a brief description of what the garment is. Well, this one here is a close-fitting underlined top that has boning, self-fabric piping at armhole and lower edges. Back features handwork eyelets with purchased ribbon lacing. Underlined skirt has waistband, pleated back, pleated hemline ruffles, and attached single-layer pleated apron. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but once you start working with patterns, you'll kind of learn what all that means. And it's basically just to give you a little bit more description on some of the details of the pattern.
Also, on the back, you'll find a notions section. This is going to be a list of all the non-fabric supplies you'll need for the garment. This is going to be things like buttons and zippers and closures, or anything else that isn't fabric. Next up, you'll see a measurement chart. You'll use this measurement chart to determine which size pattern you'll need to use. Always make sure to use your body measurements and not the size of clothing you wear, because commercial clothing sizes differ from brand to brand, and also they might not match up with the pattern sizes. Also, when trying to choose a size, use your largest body measurement to pick the size for the garment. For example, in this pattern, if you have a 30-inch waist but a 34-inch bust, use the size 16 pattern. This will fit your 30-inch waist. You can then take the dress in at the bust if it's too loose.
Another important thing that you want to remember is that a lot of times a pattern company will group the patterns into two different groups. So while these are both the same pattern with the same number, M6166, which is a McCall's pattern, this pattern here has sizes 4 through 12 on it, and this pattern has sizes 14 through 20. So when you're buying your patterns, make sure that you get the right envelope that has your size that you need in it, because these will both be in the same drawer together right next to each other. So make sure you pick up the right size.
Now that you know what size you'll be using, you can move to the next section, which is the yardage section. This will tell you how many yards of each fabric you'll need to buy. So let's pretend we're buying fabric for view A, the Dorothy dress. And let's also pretend that we're making this dress in a size 10. If we look on our chart, we'll see that we need two fabrics. One fabric for the bodice and sleeves, which is the white part of the dress, and then we need another fabric for the rest of the dress. In this case, the blue and the white gingham. We could always change the fabrics to whatever we wanted, but to make things simple, we'll match the picture. So for the white fabric, we need 1 1/4 yards, and then we'll need 4 yards of the blue and white gingham. Then we'll also need 1 1/2 yards of rickrap trim for the detail around the neck and the sleeves. Now a few things you should know about yardage. Fabric comes in different widths. The width is however wide the fabric is from selvage edge to selvage edge. And we'll talk more about this in a future lesson, but the most common widths are 45 and 60 inches. This pattern only gives the yardage needed for 45-inch fabric, which is kind of lame. But if the pattern you're using does give the yardage for the various widths, make sure you check the width of your fabric you're using and match it to the right yardage needed on the back of the envelope, so you don't end up buying too much fabric. Another thing you'll notice is that the two little asterisks behind the 45. In this case, it means with nap. We'll get more into this in a later lesson, but fabric with naps has to be cut out a certain way so that when they're sewn out together, the garment doesn't look weird. The last section will give you an idea of how long the garment will be when finished if no alterations are made to the pattern. Personally, I really never use this information, but it can be helpful when trying to determine the size of the pattern you'll need to use. Other things you should be able to find on the envelope are things like the price. However, the printed price isn't always accurate because usually you can catch patterns on sale. Sometimes you might find the difficulty on a pattern, but this isn't always the case. If you're actually shopping for patterns in a store, take a look inside at the instructions to see if the garment isn't too difficult. Lastly, sometimes there's a little block of symbols printed on the envelope. That tells you for which body shapes the design of the garment is flattering. Basically, you match your silhouette to the key, and if yours is on there, the garment should be flattering to your body type.
And that's it for this lesson. I hope this helps you out and helps you to decipher what all that information means and how it's important. Tune in next time where we actually look at the goodies inside the envelope. See you then.